October 2nd meeting. The October 2nd meeting of the Eden Prairie City Council will now come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to the start of each City Council meeting, which is generally the first and the third Tuesdays of the month, we have an opportunity for Eden Prairie residents to address us on items related to city business. This portion of the meeting is generally from approximately 6:30 to 6:55 in the council chambers. If you wish to speak at that time and be guaranteed an opportunity, please contact the city manager's office at 949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, your phone number, and the subject matter you wish to discuss. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are finished, I'll open the floor to unscheduled speakers. This portion of the meeting is not recorded nor televised. If you have questions, again, please contact the city manager's office. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
Any items to add?
Yes, just a brief council member report,
Okay.
or to raise a question, an issue.
Okay. Anything else? All in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
The motion passes. I'd like a motion for approval of the city council minutes for the meeting held Tuesday, September 18th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there a motion for approval of the city council meeting minutes for Tuesday, September 18th?
Move approval.
Second.
Any corrections to those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent calendar, items A through H. Any questions on those? Is there a motion?
Move approval of the
Second.
consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the motion passes. There are no public hearings today. This is going to be the world's shortest council meeting. Payment of claims is our motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember
First of all, I'm
Aho.
sorry, any items to question there? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Aho,
Aye.
Councilmember Case,
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson,
Aye.
Mayor Tyra Lukens.
Aye. That brings us to really our only item on the agenda tonight, reports of council members. Mr. Case.
Thank you. For anyone listening in at home, we had a group of residents call the council members to come out and visit their neighborhood over a development agreement that we had passed actually over a year ago, and it pertained to a trail connection that was connecting between 2 yards between Dove Court and Dell Road. I happened to do my visit, I guess, out there on a Saturday morning a couple weeks ago. I want to caveat this to start with that I wasn't sure if I was the actual first one to raise it until I went back and looked. I raised this issue. I take full responsibility for it, and I'm proud of the idea that over the 22 years that since Nancy and I were elected in '94, we have made it purposeful intent to try to connect neighborhoods. And part of it was that as we looked at neighborhoods across the city that were touching contiguously their backyards because they were on cul-de-sacs that ended, and there was no connection to get, from one backyard to a house. You literally, in some cases, would have to walk a half a mile to go back around to get to another neighborhood. I happen to live on a cul-de-sac that has no sidewalks on it, and we have permission from our neighbors to 2 different sets of neighbors to cut through to get back to a couple other streets that have no sidewalks. And we take walks there safely on roads that have very few cars. So I believe deeply that when we have an opportunity to connect neighborhoods by putting pathways between houses, we should do that. So that's my foundational caveat. So after visiting with the neighborhood, I still deeply believe that we, by intent, continue to do the right thing there, even though, as the neighbors will tell you, and they did present tonight at the open forum, that the particulars of this path don't accomplish the objectives that maybe some of the other paths that we've tried to connect before have done, intentionally connecting two different cul-de-sac neighborhoods. This one just connects, in essence, gives a shorter route out for two cul-de-sacs to get to Dell, which puts children, adults, whatever, onto a more major thoroughfare of a bike trail. One could argue you could go back out the cul-de-sacs and go back on 82nd and go back around. I understand that. I still don't disagree. If all the neighbors on Dove and is Essex, right?
Drexel.
Yeah, that's right. Essex is a whole nother wherever. Okay, Drexel and Dove. If all the neighbors were like absolutely thrilled with that, I would be sitting here tonight still believing it was a good idea, and I still do. So I just want to throw out to all of you. I'm really looking for your guidance. When I was standing there talking to the neighbors, one thought came to me that this particular neighborhood that lives there now, I don't know how many homes, 15, 20 homes, and they basically have gone around and polled, and I believe them. And I've talked to a couple that live over on Drexel. Nobody really wants this particular cul-de-sac, and that was one of the assumptions I was making. Maybe looking back, it would have been good for me to knock on doors prior to raising that at that last meeting. But I made some assumptions that had been consistent with other neighborhoods throughout our city, that this would have been a good thing. So knowing that the particular neighbors living in 2018 on these two cul-de-sacs are not terribly thrilled about it, one option would be keep it as is, keep the right-of-way, just don't build the trail. I mean, that's a possibility. Even keep the curb cut. And allow it down the road to, if in 10 years, I mean, our neighborhoods are changing over quite frequently, so in 10 years people come and say, we have this whole group of kids that want to bike and get down to the bike trail, and we just throw it in. The problem would be funding. We likely at that point would have to eat it, as a city, and we would have to just decide that that's an okay thing to do. We would also, if we went that path, and I'm not lobbying you, I'm just throwing out the option, would be make it so that the developer, the owner, Mr. Kopesky, incurs no additional costs. So make sure that I think there's class 5 in there now, so pulling out class 5 is cheaper than, I don't want him to incur increased debt because of our last minute redo. So that would, I think we could figure that one out, but that's a possibility. I know that he did come back in, I believe at the next meeting after we had passed this back in April 2017, and I was traveling that next meeting, and so all of you, along with Sherry, the 4 of you did vote unanimously to confirm the decision that I had initially brought before you, and so I appreciate that. And you may wish to do that tonight. I mean, I'll defer that to you, but I wanted to throw that out as a possibility. I actually mentioned to the neighbors that I would raise this, just to let them know that we can't vote on that tonight. It would have to be a developer's agreement change if we were to ever do that. We'd have to actually simply, by consensus, direct staff to go back and bring this back. But anyway, I guess I'll be quiet and let others talk, and I'm respectful of whatever you think.
Well, I don't see anybody else's light on, so I'll make a few comments. I think it's kind of ironic that at our workshop prior to this meeting, we heard from the people with ULI and all about how trails increase property values, they improve connectivity, and they're highly desirable for new people that are moving into a neighborhood. And I think certainly those of us on the council would say that has been our experience too. And we know how much our residents value these trails. There were a few comments that were made about reasons to not do these trails, and I'd kind of just like to go through them a little bit. The construction traffic issue, many neighborhoods have had to go through construction traffic as new cul-de-sacs are built on and neighborhoods connected. So I don't really buy that one. I think that, you tell your children, stay out of that area during the day, and you as adults can manage yourselves with the construction traffic that's there. It's nothing unusual is what I'm getting at. This is not a unique thing to Dove Court. Access point for the trail systems, you're saying that there's trying to remember exactly what your comment was, but it was something about how this trail doesn't help anybody access the rest of our trail systems. Well, you guys seem to be thinking about it from the direction of people outside your neighborhood coming into your neighborhood. This is as much about you and the people on Drexel Court and the new residents of Dove Court getting out of your neighborhood safely onto a trail system. As things stand now, yes, there are no sidewalks on Dove Court. That is typical of many, many, many of our cul-de-sacs. However, I do not buy the concept that it's better to go out to West 82nd and access the trail system, because you're not supposed to take a bike on a sidewalk, and there is no trail on West 82nd. So you'd be riding your bike in traffic. How can that be possibly safer than going down to the end of your cul-de-sac and getting on a trail and accessing the trail directly? That is much safer. There's some information that I would like to get before making a decision to back off on this, because right now my inclination is not to back off on this. And that would be, how many accidents do we see where trails abut a 4-lane road like this? How many pedestrian accidents are we seeing there? What is the incidence of theft from neighborhoods that have a trail system going into them? How many children have been kidnapped from our neighborhoods as a result of this? Because that was brought up. Let's get facts. If we abandon every trail that we have in Eden Prairie that goes from a neighborhood to a bike trail that is parallel to a roadway, that does not have a crossing point through the boulevard and into that roadway, it just tees into the trail. If we got rid of all of those all of those trail connectors, we would be getting rid of an awful lot of our trail system. Those are abundant. I used the trail map the other day and I started circling them all. There are a lot. Mm-hmm. So again, this is nothing unique, and we should have some data that could substantiate whether this is a big safety issue. Mr. Aho.
Well, I think I'm open to looking at it again. I think in general, I agree that we should have trails that connect with our system, and I think it makes a lot of sense. In terms of the neighborhood not wanting it, I don't know that we've had such strong opposition to a trail connection before in the past, and I don't really recall people being so opposed to it. And I guess so from my perspective, while I would like to see the trail go through, and I think it makes perfect sense, I'm also very open to hearing from the residents that live there. And I think if the majority of the residents don't want it, then maybe we do like Ron suggested, and that would be to leave the right-of-way access there, leave it ready to go, but just not completed at this time. And in a future time when the residents want it, then we can get it put in. And it's not a very big trail. I mean, it's only like one lot long. I mean, it's tiny. I don't think it would be a burden to add it later.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about the concept of allowing a neighborhood to decide whether or not a trail is going to go through adjacent or into the neighborhood. That could be a big problem. Councilmember Nelson.
I think I would like to look at this again. I had some questions when we brought it up, but I do buy into the concept that the trail system is important. I do think it's a place where we could not finish it at this point and finish it later, especially given the neighborhood's wants at this point. But having a trail system is important to the city. This is a very, very small piece of one. And there are places where the trails are intended but aren't put in yet. So I would like to know how much it would cost to put in later. And that might be a deciding point. But I think we should at least look at it again with your information, looking at the trail systems where it's connecting into and what the whole thing is for these neighborhoods, and decide if it does make sense now or if there's too many incomplete portions where we could keep the land and then go in later and let the land revert to wildlife.
Mr. Case?
I have just a couple of questions, I think, too, that if we were to delay this, what's the timing for the developer? Like, could that just be put on hold? Can they keep doing everything else? I believe they can because there's piping on either side of the trail. I think that's all on the ground. I guess this is a Robert Ellis question, but could it just be on hold until we figure out 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings down the road? And then if we ended up landing on just keeping it grass, could that, I think there's class 5 there already. Could that class 5 be removed then in the spring and not mess anything up? I guess that's my question. Do we have the time to think about, to make this decision over the next 2 meetings? Robert?
Yep, Councilmember Case, City Council. I don't know the status of the lots, if they're sold, if they have prospective buyers. I don't think so.
I believe the two are not,
Sure.
either side of it.
So knowing that, I think that creates some flexibility on timing, because they're not in a position right now to start grading out those lots. So I would think you could leave the class 5. We're going to get to that point in the year before too long where you can't purchase asphalt. So around somewhere in November, that will no longer be available. But I think there is time if the council wanted to spend 2 to 4 weeks to look into this.
And then the class 5 could be removed next spring and then dirt put down and grass and seed.
Absolutely.
I did want to comment one thing, and I absolutely, Nancy, agree with you on this, that so many times as a council, we just have to make decisions that are best for the good of all, that have a slight negative impact on neighbors, and we try to mitigate that. I mean, but that happens. And trails are one of those situations that really are for the good of everyone around, wherever we're putting the trail. What makes this case to me uniquely different as I was standing there Saturday morning is just that, and partly because of the ownership that I had in bringing it forward, this wasn't a connector that to me was really aiding anybody outside of these 2 cul-de-sacs. And that's where, even though the neighbors do talk about some people cutting through and cutting that corner, and I agree that's going to happen, school kids or something, but the reality is that people outside of these 2 cul-de-sacs are really not going to use this cut through to get in any more than they would now go down 82nd, go down Drexel, and come into their neighborhood. So I feel like the main reason I wanted this connected was for the neighbors that live there, and I want that opportunity because any of the neighbors that were standing there that morning with me are not going to be living in those homes 25 years from maybe, but probably not 25 years from now. I hope to be alive to be able to prove that or something. But the point is that at that time, I want the flexibility for those neighbors because it's trails for that neighborhood to be able to build it. So I'm okay backing off on this one. I would not back off on a trail that was benefiting many other neighborhoods, even if one neighborhood said, but we don't want it here. Well, that's not the way decisions get made. That's why we have an elected council who are making the best decisions for the good of all. So I'm okay with this. And I realize there's 3 people that have said that, and I don't know how you want to kind of word it in terms of having staff bring back answers or look at this.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think what I'd like to see is some data so that we're making this decision based on data. If safety is the primary reason that the neighbors are opposed to this, and then be prepared to vote on it next meeting.
We could do that.
Okay, all right.
So it would take a developer's agreement motion or ordinance, Mr. Rosso? How would that?
As long as we're taking some time to think about that, let me review that. In the normal course, your development agreement is part of the PUD, the Planned Unit Development Zoning Ordinance. And so I have to consider the process that's required to undo all of that, which may be more than just a vote of the council at the next meeting.
It sounds like it might not be able to come in next meeting. It might take a little more time, given what it is.
I want time to examine the repercussions of not going through what would ordinarily be an entire process of amending a development agreement, which is part of the conditions in terms of the zoning, so.
Oh, okay.
And my comment was, I think at least the next step, and we can consult with the city attorney on the development process and implications. If it's a simple revision of the development agreement, it doesn't require any major changes to the PUD. Maybe it is something in 2 weeks, but we can still bring back some answers to your questions, Mayor, at the next meeting. But we'll
We may or may not be ready to do anything more at that point.
voting on,
Okay.
on if we have to go through a public hearing process.
I mean,
Oh.
we need to lean on our attorney too. I'm not looking for, I'm hoping we can figure out a way to do this. But if it got to the point that your recommendation was, this is actually beginning to be expensive and very difficult. I was telling the neighbors when I was standing out there a couple weeks ago, I don't recall undoing this for years since I've been on. I think it's very difficult. So if it ends up being something that's much more tedious and difficult and expensive, yeah, we need your advice to come back to us at that point. The other thing I wanted to ask is, does that, I mean, you mentioned zoning. Does that suddenly require a supermajority vote to undo it?
No. No, it doesn't. There are very few zoning decisions that require a 2/3, and this would not fit in that category.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone, for thinking through that, and I appreciate the neighbors bringing their concerns as well.
Okay, anything else to bring before the council? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.